They say a champion is built long before he ever steps into the cage. It's a journey sculpted through years of blood, discipline, and devotion. For Khabib Nurmagomedov, his journey was crafted by the hands of a man whose vision stretched beyond the rugged mountains of Dagestan, his father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov. Khabib, standing tall with the UFC belt slung over his shoulder, didn't lift it for himself alone. It was a tribute to the man who had planted the dream deep within him long ago. Abdulmanap's prophecy had come to pass. Train hard, believe harder, and one day you will wear the crown. That belt was more than gold and leather. It was a promise fulfilled, and the world was about to hear the full story behind it. Long before the bright lights and roaring crowds, Abdulmanap was already crafting champions with nothing but grit and a dream. When Khabib's father passed, it felt as if the heart of an empire had been ripped out. The man who had orchestrated the rise of the most dominant lightweight in history, who had meticulously mapped the future of Dagestani dominance, was suddenly gone. Yet what he had set into motion was unstoppable. Abdulmanap's legacy wasn't a single fighter. It was an entire dynasty, a carefully drawn blueprint that stretched from Khabib's glory to the rise of Islam Makhachev and beyond. And in every corner of that plan, there was the touch of a genius whose name still echoes in every gym, every locker room, every battlefield of MMA. Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov wasn't merely a father, coach, or mentor. He was an architect of destiny. His influence seeped into every crack of the sport, reshaping the way the world looked at grappling, discipline, and the spirit of true fighting. Growing up in the harsh terrain of Dagestan, Abdulmanap knew struggle intimately. Born on December 10, 1962, in a humble family with 5 children, hardship was a constant companion. At just 6 years old, his journey into the world of physical training began under the stern watch of his own father. It wasn't trophies or fame that he sought back then. It was survival, responsibility, and a relentless pursuit of strength, both of the body and the soul. The rocky fields and cold mornings of Dagestan weren't just backdrops, they were crucibles. Abdulmanap spent his youth not on playgrounds, but laboring alongside his father to keep the family afloat. Livestock, vegetable fields, and endless days on construction sites hardened the boy into something more than a man. Even during his academic years, while pursuing a degree in accounting and economics, he was almost entirely self-sufficient by the age of 14. Life did not grant him any shortcuts, and so Abdulmanap never expected them. He didn't just endure adversity, he embraced it, weaponized it, and taught the world's greatest fighters how to thrive inside it. When military service called, Abdulmanap answered. It was during this chapter that destiny quietly shifted its course. The rugged recruit found passion not just in duty but in competition. Football, classical wrestling, judo, combat sports became the lifeblood of his existence. By sheer will, he rose to the ranks of USSR Master of Sports, claiming championships in judo across Ukraine and Dagestan. Yet destiny had bigger plans for him than medals alone. His dreams of athletic glory were cut short by the demands of war, as the Soviet Union deployed additional forces to Afghanistan. There, far from any mat or ring, Abdulmanap discovered the true purpose that would define his life: coaching. In the war-torn hills of Afghanistan, Abdulmanap was tasked with training soldiers, honing their bodies and minds into weapons of survival. But within that chaos, he saw something others missed: a path to greatness, not just for himself, but for the generations to come. After demobilization, he wasted no time. The day he returned, he began seeking young warriors to mold, starting with his younger brother, Nurmagomedov Nurmagomedov. And so the first stone of an empire was laid. Through sweat, hardship, and years of tireless dedication, Abdulmanap crafted not just athletes but world beaters, training 18 world champions, 21 medalists, and 4 Olympic champions over the course of his legendary career. But Abdulmanap's ambition was never limited to medals or national pride. He dreamed of something bigger, something almost unimaginable. Many coaches have trained Olympic champions, but Abdulmanap sought to etch the name of Dagestan into the foundation of the global fighting world. He wanted the world to recognize not just the individuals he molded, but the ferocity and brilliance of Dagestani martial arts itself. His vision was nothing short of revolutionary: to create champions who would dominate the most brutal, competitive arenas on earth. Not just survive, but reign supreme against the very best the world had to offer. It was a mission that demanded preparation few could even comprehend. Abdulmanap's training methods bordered on the mythological. While other gyms flirted with comfort, his demanded absolute obedience. In his world, a fighter's body was just clay, waiting to be shaped through an unforgiving routine. 15 hours of sparring, 20 hours of conditioning, 10 hours of theory, 10 hours of practical drills, all stacked into a single week. Missing a session wasn't an option. Questions were discouraged. Discipline wasn't taught, it was enforced. Sleep, diet, academics, everything outside of the mat was as regimented as the fights themselves. It wasn't about fighting, it was about forging a life, 1 hour, one sacrifice at a time. Perhaps nowhere was this ethos better captured than in the legend of the bear wrestling. To most, it sounded like folklore, an exaggeration spun by fans and media. But in Abdulmanap's world, it was brutally real. At just 8 years old, young Khabib wrestled a bear, not for show, but as part of his father's ruthless preparation for the harsh realities of combat. Years later, as Khabib rose through the UFC ranks, that memory lingered, a haunting reminder that the cage was never the true battlefield. The real wars had already been fought long ago in the forests and mountains of Dagestan. There were no shortcuts under Abdulmanap's regime, no easy victories. His students were forged in hardship, stripped of luxuries, and denied the trivialities that softened other fighters. Parties, distractions, and indulgences were alien concepts. Fridays were not for rest, but another day to sharpen steel. In a world obsessed with comfort, Abdulmanap demanded sacrifice, and the results spoke louder than any hype. Fighters so disciplined, so relentlessly focused, that they shattered records and expectations alike. In Abdulmanap's gym, it wasn't about who was naturally talented. It was about who could endure, who could outlast, who could be molded into something indestructible. Even when the world began to notice, when cameras and journalists flooded the gyms of Dagestan, Abdulmanap stayed the course. Fame never bent his principles. He didn't care for the limelight. His focus remained on the mission, crafting warriors who would make the mountains of Dagestan proud, who would carry the spirit of a small republic onto the grandest stages of human competition. As Khabib tore through opponents with a ferocity the sport had rarely witnessed, it became clear Abdulmanap had not just produced a fighter, he had engineered a phenomenon. And yet, as monumental as Khabib's success was, it was only the beginning. The world thought Abdulmanap's dream had been fulfilled the moment Khabib claimed the title, but they didn't realize the depth of the father's plan. Khabib wasn't supposed to be the beginning and end. He was merely the first phase of a greater design. Abdulmanap had planted seeds not just in his son, but in a brotherhood of warriors, building an unstoppable dynasty that would stretch across generations. In the shadows of Khabib's victories, Islam Makhachev was sharpening his blades, biding his time, prepared to ascend when the moment arrived. The plan had never been about one champion. It was about creating a dynasty that would dominate the world stage, long after Abdulmanap himself was gone. Even when tragedy struck, when Abdulmanap's death sent shockwaves through the fighting world, his vision did not die. It lived in the hearts of those he trained, burned into their souls. Khabib, true to his word, honored his father's memory with a final, dominant victory before retiring undefeated, unblemished, untouchable. But retirement wasn't abandonment. It was a torch passing. The second phase of Abdulmanap's blueprint was unfolding before the eyes of the world, and Islam Makhachev stood poised to seize it. Quiet, relentless, and unshakable, Islam carried the weight of Dagestan's future on his shoulders, and the ghost of Abdulmanap's teachings in his corner. When Islam faced Charles Oliveira, many doubted he could stand against the might of a champion so seasoned, so dangerous. But those who doubted had not seen the years of grinding, the countless hours spent under Abdulmanap's merciless eye. They didn't know that Islam had been prepared for this moment long before the fans knew his name. The cage door shut, and within minutes the world understood. Submission came swift and brutal. Islam wasn't just a new champion. He was a continuation of a legacy, the embodiment of a father's meticulous, unbreakable plan. That night, the championship belt returned to Dagestan once more, and Abdulmanap's spirit roared across the fighting world. As Islam defended his title against the most dangerous challengers the UFC had to offer, it became obvious that Abdulmanap's reach had extended beyond even what the world imagined. Islam's style was different from Khabib's, yet eerily familiar. Smothering pressure, ruthless control, and an unwavering will to dominate. He wasn't a copy, he was an evolution. Fans and experts alike marveled at his technique, his composure, his ability to dismantle world-class opponents with chilling efficiency. This wasn't merely skill, it was the manifestation of years of programming, of a philosophy that Abdulmanap had drilled into his fighters from the cradle. And yet, even as Islam stood atop the world, the father's plan was not yet complete. Abdulmanap had always looked further than others dared to. Beyond Islam, beyond Khabib, there were others rising, each a different reflection of the school he had built. Fighters like Nurmagomedov and Usman Nurmagomedov, each bearing the fire of Dagestan in their blood, each destined to carve their own names into the history of combat sports. The third phase of the father's plan was now unfolding, and it promised to be even more devastating than the first two. This wasn't just about winning fights. It was about cementing a dynasty that no force in the world could ignore. Nurmagomedov, with his smooth, lethal transitions and lightning-fast strikes, was a new breed of predator in the cage. Unlike Khabib's grinding suffocation or Islam's calculated dominance, Umar fought with a fluidity that stunned even seasoned veterans. Grappling like a python, striking like a blade from the shadows, he was not just good, he was terrifying. Experts whispered that he might surpass his predecessors, becoming the finest fighter Dagestan had ever produced. Every jab, every scramble, every takedown was a tribute to Abdulmanap's vision. Fighters who didn't just win, they annihilated. But fate, as always, demanded its pound of flesh. Umar's road was not smooth. Injuries, timing, politics, they delayed his march toward the title. Yet every obstacle only sharpened his resolve. Those who trained with him spoke in awe of his precision, his impossible speed, and his icy calm under pressure. Even after a narrow defeat on the brink of a championship, Umar's stock did not fall, it rose. Everyone who witnessed his fights knew it was only a matter of time before he fulfilled his destiny. Abdulmanap's plan had built fighters who could endure storms without breaking, who would find their way back to the summit no matter how far they fell. And lurking in the wings was the final weapon of Abdulmanap's arsenal, Usman Nurmagomedov. If Umar was the blade, Usman was the hammer. Bigger, stronger, ruthless in his pursuit of dominance, Usman carried the raw power of Dagestan's mountains within him. While Khabib and Islam ruled the UFC, Usman stormed through Bellator, capturing the lightweight belt with terrifying ease. Watching him was like witnessing the future unfold in real time. Every punch, every takedown, every submission was a promise to his coach's memory. We are not done yet. Usman's journey was different, fighting in a different promotion, carrying the same expectations but forging his own path. And with Khabib in his corner, whispering the battle-tested wisdom passed down from Abdulmanap, Usman showed the world that he was not just another Nurmagomedov. He was the next evolution, a beast forged not only by blood, but by choice. He wasn't merely preserving the dynasty, he was expanding it, planting its flag in new territory. And all the while, the father's plan, that incredible, almost mythical vision, pulsed stronger than ever through every punch, every victory, every defiant step into the cage. For Usman, the expectations were immense, but the burden never broke him. If anything, it made him even more dangerous. Inside the cage, he wasn't just another fighter chasing belts. He was a living testament to Abdulmanap's greatness. Dominating his division with an almost eerie calm, Usman showcased the depth of talent Dagestan continued to produce. Even without Khabib or Islam at his side for every fight, he carried the entire school on his shoulders like a seasoned warrior. When opponents stepped across from him, they weren't just fighting a man, they were fighting the legacy of an entire people, a dynasty that refused to fall. And though the bright lights and roaring fans could have distracted a lesser man, Usman remained focused. The mission was too important. Every time he entered the cage, it was with the spirit of the mountains behind him, the words of Abdulmanap echoing in his mind. Train hard, remain humble, fight for something bigger than yourself. His movements were crisp, his strategy flawless. Usman wasn't simply winning fights, he was imposing a new order, the Nurmagomedov order, built on discipline, humility, and overwhelming dominance. The dynasty was alive, growing, and it showed no signs of slowing down. But the path of a dynasty is never smooth. Injuries, setbacks, personal losses, they test the will of even the greatest warriors. Usman knew this better than anyone. Training without his full team, preparing through the pain of separation, battling not just opponents but the crushing weight of expectation. He forged himself in solitude. Many would have faltered. Usman thrived. His mindset was not one of survival but of conquest. He wasn't merely holding the line. He was expanding it, proving that no matter the obstacles, the fire Abdulmanap lit could never be extinguished. Meanwhile, the world watched in awe and disbelief as the Nurmagomedov dynasty continued to stretch its iron grip across the sport. Analysts debated who was the greatest: Khabib, Islam, Umar, Usman. But the debates missed the real point. It wasn't about individuals, it was about the school, the system, the unbreakable spirit that Abdulmanap had built brick by brick, fighter by fighter. Each new champion was not an isolated miracle. They were inevitable outcomes of a plan set in motion decades ago, forged in sweat, sacrifice, and endless, brutal discipline. Even now, years after Abdulmanap's passing, his presence is felt as powerfully as ever. Inside every takedown, every perfectly timed strike, every victory speech dedicating success to family, faith, and coach, there is Abdulmanap. Fighters continue to rise from Dagestan, and none stray from the path he laid down. It is as if the mountains themselves demand it, as if his spirit lives not just in his bloodline, but in the very air, the soil, the stone of his homeland. Every time a Dagestani hand is raised, it is not just a victory for the fighter, but a silent nod to the great architect who made it all possible. And yet the plan is not finished. Whispered in gyms and among fighters is the knowledge that the final phase, the rise of an undeniable, unstoppable generation, is only just beginning. Abdulmanap's fighters aren't merely dominating, they are evolving, adapting, growing deadlier with each fight. The system he built wasn't static, it was alive, designed to breed warriors who could adapt to any era, any challenge. Even now, young fighters train in obscurity under the strict principles he taught, preparing to continue the dynasty, to extend the Nurmagomedov name into yet another decade of greatness. Behind every triumph, there is still that foundation of sacrifice and struggle. No bright lights can erase it. No victory speech can soften it. In Dagestan, where hardship breeds strength and discipline is valued above all else, young warriors carry forward the lessons of Abdulmanap. His life's work wasn't about building a single champion or even a handful. It was about creating a culture of excellence so powerful that it could withstand the tides of time. Every child lacing up gloves, every teenager drilling takedowns in a dusty gym is a living testament to that culture. As the next generation emerges, the blueprint remains the same: unyielding discipline, crushing pressure, and an unwavering commitment to honor, family, and faith. Whether it's Umar sharpening his weapons for another title run, Usman dominating Bellator and soon stepping onto the UFC stage, or countless unnamed prodigies preparing in the shadows, they all march to the same drumbeat, the one Abdulmanap set into motion decades ago. In every fiber of their being, they carry the great coach's message. Greatness is not given. It is earned through pain, through sacrifice, through relentless, tireless effort. The fighting world stands on the edge, witnessing something that has never been seen before. A dynasty engineered not by luck or circumstance, but by design. Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov's plan is no longer a quiet dream whispered in the mountains of Dagestan. It is a living, breathing force that has already changed the face of mixed martial arts forever. And yet, There is an eerie sense that we have only witnessed the beginning. The dynasty's next move is coming. The question is not if they will conquer again. It's when and how devastating the next wave will be. And somewhere beyond the reach of the bright lights and roaring crowds, the spirit of the great coach watches patiently, waiting for the final piece of his master plan to fall into place.